Weird Realities Network presents Blondes, Books, and Campfire Tales, where we pull up a log, roast a marshmallow, and settle in as these two blondes talk spooky tales, urban legends, and classic horror icons. Exciting guests, perky blondes, and sinister tales makes this podcast as good as a double stack s'more. So let's join Bethany and Crystal as they gather around the campfire in Blondes, Books, and Campfire Tales. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Blondes, Books, and Campfire Tales. I am Bethany. We got Crystal, we got Rikki, and we have special guest Vic Ferrari. Like, everyone's familiar with him. We love him.
Yay!
Welcome back, Vic. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Absolutely. Hadley reached out and she goes, Vic's released a book. Who wants to interview him? And I don't think I even gave anyone else a chance. I was like, we will. Yeah. But we're definitely excited to have you. I haven't had a chance to read your book because there was a mix-up with, I just moved like a month ago, and they sent your book to my old address, and I had to like do a whole thing and get it. And so I literally got it today.
Oh, cool.
Oh, so you did physical. I got it on Kindle, so I immediately had it, but then I had like, I'm reading it. I was hoping to have finished it before tonight, but I had family stuff happen, so I haven't finished it yet, but I'm enjoying it.
Sounds like somebody did their homework assignments.
Hey.
I looked it up online.
There you go. I looked it up online.
Well, I know we've been on hiatus just a little bit, but we're excited to do this special episode with you. I totally just blanked on what I was going to say. We had a whole bunch of new updates on StreamYard, so that's why we're a little delayed on starting just now. But I feel like that's normal with our show at this point.
Circle faces
Exactly.
here. This is different.
I don't know how to change that. That was from the previous one, so we're just
It looks cool though. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, we're gonna rock it this way right now because I feel like if I mess with it, I'm gonna do something weird. But anyway, so Vic, good book so far.
Yeah, it's my 8th one, my 5th sixth NYPD themed book. I haven't run out of stories yet, and luckily for me, I mean, a lot of the stories in my books are things that happened to me or famous things that happened around the NYPD when I was active. But luckily for me, I have circle of friends that feed me stories about things that have happened, and sometimes it's just so matter of fact. Like they'll just start talking about a guy, and I'm like, "Oh, that's a great story." My friend's like, "Oh, Jesus, don't do it." And I was like, "No, this is just too damn good." I mean, and I change the names, the dates, the locations. I try not to get too close to the target. I don't want to embarrass anyone or get anyone divorced. But I mean, the New York City Police Department is a 3-ring circus. There was a lot going on. There's still a lot going on. So thank goodness I haven't run out of stories.
So you have the presumptions, and then of course the dysfunctions. So all the ideas of what you're trying to get to, and then all the mishaps as a result of just in general humans.
Rikki, I got to tell you, the most difficult thing for me to do as a writer is come up with a title for my book. And my books don't have beginning, middle, end. They're all short stories about things that happened during my time with the department. And often I'm like coming up to a deadline where I've got to get this to an author. And obviously the title has to resonate with the book cover. And for me, it's painful that 2 or 3 weeks before I can come up with a title. And then once I've got the title, then try to think of something that'll mesh with the title for the front book cover. Because a self-published author, and my price point of my books are $10, it's like buying a bottle of wine. So if you're not a wine drinker and you go to the supermarket, you're going to a party, you want to spend about $10 for a bottle of wine, and you want the label to have a funny name or something cool. You know what I mean? So it's the same thing with a book.
And it's the fact that it pulls you in. Conjunction, junction, dysfunction.
What's your function?
Schoolhouse Rock?
Yep.
Like you literally just described how I buy wine and how I buy books by new authors.
Same thing with $10.
That's very literally how I buy them.
Well, another mistake. I mean, we're getting into how to write a book and how to market a book, but a big mistake first-time authors make is that cover. They go cheap. They hire a friend who has some graphic designing experience. The cover doesn't quite look right, doesn't come off right. and that puts you behind. And also they'll price themselves out because they'll say, well, this is my life story. I'm going to charge 25 bucks for that. Well, that's great, but unless you're James Patterson or Stephen King and you've got a publishing company behind you that's putting you in brick and mortar stores and is putting your product in front of people with SEO on Google searches, it's not going to sell. It could be the greatest book in the world, but if you're an unknown, that dark horse to really get out there, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. I think that's like, you really do. Like, you have to, because, yeah. I'm like, you're literally describing all my shopping habits. $25 for a book, probably not going to happen for me.
Yeah, who is this guy? The balls. That kind of money.
Like, I have to know the author and really like that author to spend $25 on a book. My budget for books is not that big, so I like to make it stretch.
Tell you what, when I'm going to a store, I'm looking for something new. I will often go to Fry's, Safeway, whatever's there, and kind of peruse the paperbacks that are there. I like the really small ones, like I fit in my pocket. Now I have big pockets, but I like to fit them in my pockets, and then I'll kind of go through those, and that's where I've discovered a few. But then I've also found some stinkers too. So it's just kind of. But then from there, you can expand on. It's like, okay, I really like James Rollins, so I'm going to find all the James Rollins stuff. There's a Vic Ferrari guy. I don't know who he is, but I'm going to check him out. All that stuff. So
another challenging thing is the book jacket. So on the back of the book cover, if someone picks up your book in a store, why should I buy this? Or if you're on Amazon or Kindle Unlimited, or you're buying an ebook, you've got, the way I look at it is bullet points. Get their attention, outline your best stories, put your best stories up front, because with Kindle Unlimited, you're getting paid by page turned. A lot of authors like, well, I'm going to put the good stuff in the back and make them get there. If you don't get their attention in the first couple of pages, and most authors, they make the first, I think, 10 or 15% available to preview for free. If you don't hook them in that first couple of pages, you've lost them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I've seen people
with Kindle Unlimited books. If I'm not enjoying it, I return it.
Right.
I did actually purchase your book because I wanted to give you that support, and I don't know how Kindle Unlimited supports authors. I'm like, I like it, but I
get paid either way.
But yeah, if I'm not enjoying a Kindle Unlimited book, I'm like, I can only take out 20 books at a time. I'm returning this one. So
when you're putting this out here, for example, are you putting like 2/3 of your best stories forward and then filler ones and then another really big one to kind of, sandwich it? Or are you more relying on kind of an intro that's midway through your book story that's the hook?
It depends on the book, and it depends on the story. So like with this one, okay, I'm looking at the stories, and I liked all of them. It's not that I this story's weak, and for me, it takes me about a year until I get that thing to finally get it to an editor. This time, a lot of my stories open up with something funny that intertwines with police work. This particular book, I went with a true crime story about buying stolen cars off a guy. One of my coworkers shot the guy, and then we wind up buying more stolen cars from the guy, and then the guy flees to the Dominican Republic to become a dentist, which I thought was actually pretty funny, that he's over there doing root canals while we're scrambling around looking for him. And I said, you know what? Instead of going with something funny, I'm going to go with something more true crime and ironic.
Gotcha.
I did think the guy fleeing to the Dominican Republic to become a dentist, I thought that was really funny. That story made me laugh.
Well, we thought it was a joke when the informant the guy takes off. He spots our surveillance team. We had purchased several stolen Mercedes-Benz from him in a parking lot in northern Manhattan, upper Manhattan. And he spots the surveillance, and him and his buddy are looking at our surveillance van. We call it the hairy eyebrow, which means like they spot the cops and they're giving you that hard look. And we told our informant, swing by this guy where he hangs out and find out what's going on with him. And he goes, he's gone. What do you mean he's gone? He goes, he spotted that surveillance van in the parking lot. He's gone. He went to the Dominican Republic. And these guys used to go back and forth all the time. We always used to say we didn't know how the Dominican Republic didn't sink with the amount of stolen cars, motorcycles, heavy equipment that they ship over there. And it's not just the Dominican Republic. It's a lot of third world countries take our stuff, steal it, and send it overseas. And, we were trying to lure him back with another scam. And he goes, he's not coming back. He knows you guys are looking for him. We did a press conference because we had locked up other people in that case. He was the main target, but he eluded us. And he goes, he's practicing dentistry in the Dominican Republic. He's never coming back. And I checked while I was writing this book, and to date, he's never served any jail time in New York State.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he has not come back, to my knowledge.
We got Londa on. What's up, Londa?
Yeah, it just makes me, and I guess I don't have that criminal mindset. So, but when I was reading that story, I'm like, well, if you have the interest in dentistry and that is a pretty decent career, why would you go to crime instead, where you're constantly having to worry about, am I going to get caught? Am I going to spend time in jail? And it's or you could be making money being a dentist. I just don't understand that mindset of,
You're not a criminal.
Exactly.
And maybe there's a thrill involved too. Or maybe this is just what was presented at the time. And maybe the dentistry happened to work out, whereas it may not have been the initial thought. I don't know.
I think he was one of the smarter ones. I never met the guy. I mean, I surveilled him. I watched his movements. But I think he was one of the few that said, it's time to knock this off. I've taken this criminal career as far as I can over here. And who knows, maybe was he still involved? And maybe he was on the receiving end with other guys stealing for him over here and shipping cars to the Dominican Republic. Who knows? But what I know is, this happened around 2000. I retired in 2007. And as of 2024, he is yet to serve time in New York. So, and he's got that indictment is not going away.
Oh.
So how do you...
a statute of limitations on that then, or
not if you're indicted? Once you're indicted for a crime, that stops the clock.
Okay. So
if you're not indicted, the statute of limitations for a felony in New York State, most places, is 5 years for a felony, 2 years for a misdemeanor, and homicide. Obviously, the clock continues to run no matter how much time it's expired. That's why in New York we had what was called the Upper East Side rapist. Early 90s, and this guy was running around Upper Manhattan raping women, and the Manhattan DA's office, to their credit back then, came up with the idea, well, rape isn't a homicide. 5 years, this guy could rear his ugly head and we can't do a thing. So what they did was they indicted his DNA.
Oh.
So they had a DNA profile that came back to multiple women, and that's what they do now. So if they have a rape and they don't have a suspect, they indict the DNA. So later on, if he gets arrested and he gets convicted of a felony and they do a swab and they put it into CODIS, or like how they caught the Golden State Killer and several other, they've been solving tons of unsolved homicides that go back decades. With a lot of these services where, say for argument's sake, Bethany and Ricky want to find long lost relatives, and you send a sample off to some lab to find your distant cousins, right? Well, law enforcement now goes to these companies and says, we have no match. It's not turning up in our system. Can you look? And then they'll say, yeah, we have someone who's a distant relative to Ricky and Bethany. And then they'll reach out to you guys and they'll go, let me ask you a question. Do you guys have any relatives that lived in Minnesota or Fargo, North Dakota? Yeah, Ma used to talk about a second cousin who was a bit of a weirdo that moved there. And that's how and then what they'll do is they'll surveil that person, and then they'll watch them throw out a slice of pizza or a cup of coffee. They'll snatch it up. They'll get a DNA profile, and that's how they've captured a lot of people.
I think that was on an SVU episode, actually. It was like a big debate on if they could use the DNA evidence found with someone who had done one of those tests. Mm-hmm. So, but SVU, I think this episode was 20 years ago, so they were probably still trying to debate how they could do that.
I think it's going to get challenged in the court because I'm guessing there's there's got to be an expectation of privacy.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't, maybe there's something that when you're giving this sample, it's to find people. So you're kind of signing a waiver. It's not that they're just taking it from you without your knowledge and then using it. You're voluntarily handing in this sample to find people.
Yeah.
See, I wonder if there's a clause in there that says something along those lines, saying this
Probably.
may be used.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like, I do think it's really cool that they caught the Golden State Killer that way. Like, I just think that's really cool. Like, and he's now in prison where he belongs, or maybe he died. I don't remember because it's been a few years. But like that definitely gives me hesitation on using those services because I'm like, well, who else are they giving this information to? Like, I don't want my DNA information just floating around.
Well, especially something like the Chinese government, if they go and buy the company or they have access to it. I mean, the Chinese are collecting our data at an alarming rate.
And if this ends up on the dark web for something else that can be utilized
That's
for either identification or creating, new IDs. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
don't know. I'm just like, who wants to know about my stuff? But I guess some people do, or they can use it for things.
Well, I mean, we've got history in our family.
Oh, are you guys going to have a criminal caught if you do 23andMe?
But we also have on the other side too. We got a good quarter of our family is like cops, and one of them, Bear Claw, was a U.S. Marshal. So,
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, and he was well known enough that he would call up somebody and say, "Hey, I'm Bear Claw's Dudesman. Got a warrant out for your arrest. I'm coming for you. You might as well meet me over here." And often they would just meet him.
Yeah, they turn themselves in.
Yeah, the dude was huge. He's like Hagrid.
Yeah.
I mean, if he's
Also-
from your dad's side of the family.
He is, yeah. Bear Claw was definitely a very unique character. He got his name because when he was 17, he was working logging in the woods, and it was literally he had an axe and a bear came up on him, and it was him or the bear, and so he did what he had to do. But because on his mother's side of the family, she's part Native American, I forgot which tribe, they you have to honor the kills that you have, and so he took the claws and strung them around his neck. And that's how he got the name Bear Claw. And it got to the point that when I was talking with him and I asked him, I was like, what's your real name? And it took him a second to remember that it was Robert Stutzman. Because he's always been Bear Claw. But yeah, he's honestly, yeah, he was a really great guy. And it's sad that he passed, but
yeah. Well, I mean, he also built like stagecoaches for movie stuff and such. So it was kind of cool.
yeah, he was born in the wrong not
100 years too late.
the wrong century. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Vic, how do you decide which stories you're going to put in which book? Or do you just kind of just come up with stories, collect them, and then pluck them for, like, do you have a theme for some of your books, or?
No, I just start writing. I just start getting ideas and I just start writing a story, and I'll write as much as I can. And then I'll move on to the next story, and then I'll come up with an idea and go back to it. And I just grow them until they get to a certain point. And I'm like, all right, I've taken this story as far as I can go. Sometimes I get pissed off at myself because I'll make the story too long. And I'm like, but I also have to realize I get frustrated because I know what's going to happen. And I worked in law enforcement. A lot of people haven't. So they are interested in those details that I would take for granted. Like, oh, people know that. And like, no, they don't. So a lot of times I got to talk myself out of it and just leave it as it is. It just depends. Sometimes there's stories that I call it like a boneyard where I'm just not there yet with the story. I took a couple of stories that were going to be in this book and I just haven't gotten them right. And I pulled them out and put 2 others in, as opposed to I'll work on them and I'll use them for my next book if they're ready.
Are there any stories you feel that you're never going to put into a book for any reason?
Again, I don't want to get anybody divorced or in trouble.
We're not that popular.
There's a couple of things I got to take to the grave with me.
So we were chatting a little bit before we got on here about like how the last time you were on, you were talking about, you did bring up a lot of homicide stories, and I feel like we're coming up on the holidays. Do you have any good holiday homicide stories you can tell us?
Holiday homicide stories. I got a holiday guy died in his apartment. So it's the early 90s, and I knew this guy. Was not a fan. And he's got a foot post by himself, and he's a young cop. It's a Friday night. He wants to go out after work. It's a 4 to 12. And it comes over as a cardiac in a housing project on an upper floor. So he gets on the elevator. He gets off the floor. It was an elderly gentleman that lived by himself. Died in his apartment. The neighbor, I guess, had the key to the apartment, checked on the guy every day. He didn't come out and meet him for coffee. What happened to Ned? Lets himself in, finds Ned dead in the bed. Oh, that rhymed.
Ned dead in the bed.
Never did Ned. Gotcha.
There's your new title.
He calls an ambulance, or we call in New York City a bus. 2 EMTs show up. Guy's dead. Been dead probably about an hour or so. He's cold to the touch. So the cop wants to go out that night. And he turns to the EMTs. He goes, "Well, aren't you going to take him?" And they go, "No, we don't take him. You got to wait for the medical examiner." And he goes, "The only time we would take him is if he died in public view, like in the street. He's in his apartment. You got to wait for the medical examiner." And they leave. The cop gets pissed off because in his mind, he wants to go out. Now we call it in the NYPD sitting on a DOA. So when you show up to something like that, the detectives are going to come, the sergeant's going to come, they're going to do their preliminary investigation. But essentially, if it doesn't look like it's a suspicious death, even though the guy is dead, you got to wait for the medical examiner to officially pronounce them dead. And then the medical examiner is going to ask questions. They're going to look and see if they had medication. They're going to try to get a hold of the doctor. You know, what's this guy's story? Did he have health problems? And usually the medical examiner is going to say, suspicious death, wait for the morgue wagon. We're going to take the body to the morgue for autopsy. Or, yeah, you know what? This guy's old. He died in his house. Tells the family, go call the funeral home. But the cop still has to stay with that body until A, the medical examiner takes the body, or B, the funeral home comes. And the cop didn't want to get stuck doing that because he knew he'd be there all night. So about a half hour later, the cop gets on the radio and calls over a cardiac. Well, the 2 EMTs hadn't really left. They went downstairs and they went back to their ambulance and they were having their coffee outside. So they grabbed their stuff and they run back upstairs. And when they hit the hallway, this time Ned is in the hallway, lurched over to one side. And they turn around and they go, "What the hell is this?" And the cop panics now because he dragged the body out into the hallway and just dumped him there. And he goes, "You're not going to believe this." He goes, "You guys left. I was writing in my memo book, picking up paperwork. The guy jumped up, said, 'Oh, shit,' ran through the apartment, opened the door, and collapsed again." He's starting to have the early stages of rigor mortis. He's starting to get stiff. Sergeant shows up. The EMTs are pitching a bitch. P.S. The cop got kicked out. He wound up getting bounced to the Bronx, and then we got stuck with him. Nowadays, he probably would have gotten locked up, at the very least gotten fired, but he lost 30 vacation days, a year probation, got kicked out of the borough, and to my knowledge, did his 20 years. But that happened around the holidays. So I guess if you were looking for a holiday Christmas death.
I mean, I'm like, okay, I understand you want to go out and like, it sucks getting stuck at work no matter what your job is, but moving a dead body just so you can go get a drink seems a little extreme.
Well, early in my career, I was a rookie cop working in the South Bronx. It was in the summer. I had just gotten to the precinct out of field training, and I was doing a midnight, and I'm the new guy. And they said, "All right, go up to this apartment and relieve the 4 to 12 guy. He's sitting with a DOA." I said, "Okay." So I drive up there. I got my newspaper. I brought food or whatever, a soda. I go up there. 4 to 12 guy, yeah, guy's dead. We're just waiting for the medical examiner. I said, "Okay." And he leaves. And, it's hot. It's the summer. I got all the windows open. The guy is starting to really stink. And I always, when I got stuck with something like that, I always looked to see if there were photos of the person. I just kind of wanted to see what they were like in life, like what kind of person they were. It's like I'm going to spend this time with them. I just kind of, in my mind, just wanted to see what they were like.
Yeah.
And the guy died. He was in the hallway. So he was dead in the hallway, and I was in the living room. And I'm up there about 15, 20 minutes, and knock on the door, and I'm figuring it's the medical examiner. It's about 12:30 at night. I'm like, wow, that's quick, because I had been told it takes hours for them to show up, and that was true. And an elderly black gentleman's at the door, and he goes, my brother passed away earlier tonight. Do you mind if I come in? I said, no, absolutely come in. And I says, we're just waiting for the medical exam. He goes, yeah, they told me. And he starts telling me about their life. He's telling me about they were born and raised in North Carolina. They came up to New York City when they were young men. They both got jobs as bus drivers. Neither one of them married. They both lived in the same building, one upstairs from the other. And he was just, going on about what a great, and it was the older brother that died. And he was just going on and on and on about his brother. And I'm listening, and he goes into the fridge. He takes out 2 beers, and he pops one open, and he hands it to me. And I go, I'm on probation. I'm a rookie cop. You're not supposed, that's a big no-no. And he hands me a beer, and I go, oh, I can't. I appreciate it. He goes, son, I'm not drinking alone tonight. So I'm sitting there with a dead guy on the floor, and I'm in the living room with his brother just drinking beers with this old guy. And he's telling me about their life. And a little while later, an hour or so later, another knock at the door. Medical examiner shows up eating a slice of pizza. And yeah, all right. Call the medical examiner's office, blah, blah, blah. Call the funeral home. I said, all right. So he leaves, and I'm waiting. The funeral home comes. They take the body, and, I'm thanking the old man for being hospitable to me and everything. And he goes to hand me another beer. And I go, no, I can't. I like, at this point, I already had like 2 or 3 beers. I don't want to get busted. I go, no, I'm good. He goes, for the next time. And I was like, is he saying to me he hopes I find him? Just the way he said that, for the next time. And I just found that so ironic. I never went back to that building. I never went back to that apartment. I never saw the guy again. But that's a story that's in one of my books. But yeah, it's dealing with death. There were guys I work with that were ghouls. They carry cameras and they would take photos of this shit. I never saw the point of that. I mean, it was one of those things I had to deal with it. But I always, in the back of my mind, I was like, well, it's not me. And it's not somebody I know, so let me just process this and just move on to, live another day.
So just to kind of pivot a little bit, I somehow got stuck on dispatcher and cop TikTok and hearing the interactions between dispatchers and the cops when they talk and everything, and the relationships on that. Do you have any fun stories about like the dispatcher? Yeah.
Yeah. So
I see, I'm like,
it's just wind them up. Why don't you?
I know.
But you got to realize, like, the New York City Police Department is huge. There's 77 police stations scattered across the 5 boroughs, and usually there's 2 or 3 or on a slow 4 police stations on one frequency. I have to give our dispatchers credit. It's not like a small town police department. Like, I worked later on for a small police department, and the dispatchers would bitch about everything. And I'm like, you got 4 people working a 4 to 12, and there's 8 cops out there. Like NYPD, the 9th Division, you've got 3 busy precincts, and, shots fired in the 4-6, foot pursuit in the 5-2. It's going on. Our dispatchers were really good. Weak ones didn't last very long because we would just start barking back at them, and the supervisors would figure it out at one police plaza, like, this one can't hang. But our dispatchers were really good. I have to give them a lot of credit. Every now and then you'd find one that was an idiot, but for the most part, they were very good and did a really professional job. I mean, that's your lifeline. You get into a foot pursuit or something, they got to clear the air. It got a little hairy with car chases. So, like, the dirty little secret in the NYPD is we're not allowed to chase stolen cars. Did we chase stolen cars? Yeah, all the time. But if you got into a car chase and you caught the guy and no one got hurt, no harm, no foul, no one's going to come looking for your job. But if you got into a car chase and the bad guy got hurt, a cop got hurt, God forbid a civilian got hurt, then they're going to come to hurt you. They might even take your job. And what would happen with the NYPD is you never went over the radio and said, I'm in pursuit of a stolen car. You would always say, I'm following the 16 vehicle. But the dispatcher could tell by the sirens in the background or the distance you're traveling, and you're breaking the land speed record. I'm at this location, 10 seconds later, you're at that location. It's obvious you're doing 70, 80, 90 miles an hour. And then the dispatcher would say, you in pursuit? Then you would ignore them because to acknowledge you're in a pursuit, now you're willingly breaking the rules. So then you would just keep giving the location. And she would go, unit, are you in pursuit? Central, southbound on Broadway. You would just keep going and going until it was a game we played with them.
Mm-hmm. You're like, I'm going through a tunnel. I can't hear you.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
following really close.
Breaking up.
Oh, yeah, all the time.
So do you recall anything with the dispatcher and cops and everything where maybe there's a big since you said so many dispatchers will be with different units on the same channel, was there ever a big like mix up that
cross signal somehow?
Yeah,
constantly. And what would frustrate the dispatchers is, so you got to remember, on a busy night, any NYPD, so like the 7th zone, the 4-4 might have 20 cars working. It's 20 police cars out, one precinct. Then you've got foot posts walking around. Then you've got other units like street crime floating around and Bronx Task Force. And then you have the 4-0 precinct that's on that division. So what would happen is you'd have a foot pursuit or something, or a cop would call a 1013, officer needs assistance. And then everything shuts down on the radio. Like if you hear someone calling a 1085 or a 1013, that means, you got to get the cavalry here like now. God forbid a cop would get on the radio and try to run a plate or give back a disposition. Like they were going to get cracked. But what would be funny is sometimes with like car chases, or if a cop calling for assistance, the cavalry's coming and you would hear the dispatcher, like the cop that would initiate it would go, Central, slow it down. Like we got him, but guys are still coming. Like the street is still filling up with cops, and the dispatchers would try to pull guys off that and send them back out. Like, all right, they've got this, go back to doing what you were doing or where you were going. So it would get crazy, especially in the summertime when it was really busy.
Yeah. So when you watch, movies and things like that, cop shows or cop movies, anything with interactions like that, obviously anyone in a profession who sees a movie on it, they're going to point out all the mistakes. But do you have any recommendations on shows or movies that you think actually really nailed it? Like they did a really good job of portraying that.
Nothing in the last 30 years. I can't watch Blue Bloods and NYPD Blue. It's just, I can't. I've watched like 15 minutes of both and I'm like, come on. There are two movies that I grew up with that's why I wanted to become a cop. And it definitely it resonated with the time period. And I caught a little bit of that before things started to change. The French Connection. And there's another great movie called The 7 Ups, both 1970s films about the New York City Police Department. Fort Apache, the Bronx with Paul Newman, that was late 70s, early 80s. That was actually filmed in my old station house. That's another one that just kind of shows the time period and the way the cops would interact with the public and the way they dressed. And you had old timers on patrol. That's before Hollywood. Everybody was good looking in a Hollywood movie. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's like if I want to see a movie about cops, I want to see guys with coffee stained teeth. I want to see guys whose hair isn't perfect. You know what I mean? I can't take that Hollywood scrub version. I like the older movies where it was definitely closer to the time period.
Yeah.
I don't know. Barney Fife wasn't exactly a looker. I mean,
what was that? What was that? North or South Carolina, right? Mayberry RF.
Yeah.
But wasn't that like the 70s too?
No,
or was that
60s?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I just know it was before I was alive.
Hope he's older than me.
But Yeah.
So what about were there ever any concerns of media involvement in the police or active uh, events that could be viewed by those that you're chasing or after?
Well, you got to remember, I retired in 2007, so
Hmm.
long before cell phone cameras. I
Okay.
mean, I retired. We were using the Nextel.
Oh yeah.
So, I mean, I think the flip phone where you could actually take a photo was a year or two after I retired. So there was nothing with people recording things,
Or
nothing
streamed
like
live.
that. But as far as the media, we didn't talk to them. We were instructed early on, you don't talk to them. Anytime they had a question, we referred them to the Deputy Commissioner of Public Information. We definitely had a cantankerous relationship with them. And I get it, but there were times I saw things and then the press would report it, and I'd say, like, my father would ask me something like, that's not what happened. Like, I was there. You know what I mean? So I know they have a job to do, but in the New York media, they often they were more looking for a police corruption angle on everything. And was there police corruption? Yeah, but it was far and few between. It wasn't like it was in every station house and everyone was bad. Every now and then you would get like a flare up in a precinct, but it wasn't like the way they would report it.
Yeah, I feel like that's something that's in a lot of like movies and shows and stuff, especially if it's like centered around New York cops. They always make it seem like corruption was just running rampant throughout the whole police department.
Well, it was in the 1970s, but they addressed it. I mean, they had the Knapp Commission hearings. A lot of people went to jail for it. They changed policy. They started paying the cops more money. There were a lot of changes as a result of the Knapp Commission. I know a lot of the old timers feel they didn't get a fair shake with that, but they were out of control. So something had to be done, and it was. Like, when I got hired, I'll say this about the New York City Police Department: they do a lot of things wrong. But what they do get right is, at least when I was active, was from the minute you get hired, they tell you you're going to get fired if you screw around. Like, in the police academy, they bring in district attorneys tasked to prosecute police corruption. They bring in retired members that threw their careers away. They show you videos of cops that went to jail and did jail time. So it's like they put it out there in front of you, like, you're going to fuck around, you're going to find out what happens to you. So if you had any common sense, you weren't going to go there. But inevitably, there's always someone that thinks they're going to, gauge the system and be able to pull something off.
Alan's asking if you were in the area when 9/11 happened.
Yeah, I was down there walking around by about 1:30 in the afternoon. Would probably save my life. I had court that day in Lower Manhattan. What saved my life was the guy I was supposed to go to court with. We were going to pull a guy out. He was going to be a snitch. I locked this guy up for a couple of stolen cars, and he was going to give us a couple of DMV employees that were pumping out driver's licenses. And we were going to have what's called a proffer hearing, where we sit down with the district attorney, the defense attorney. It's called Queen for a Day. And Queen for a Day means the guy is going to tell us what he can give us, and we're going to make a decision if we're going to use him or not and pull him out of jail. And whatever he tells us short of a homicide can't be used against him for that one day. And the guy at my sergeant was running late. And we were up in the Bronx, which is a good hour and a half with traffic. And I was like, come on, we got to get going. And the first plane hit, and we were told to stand by, put on our uniforms. And yeah, by like 1:30, I was down there walking around.
So you had talked about when police officers first start and they run through everything that, basically like the whole fuck around, find out thing. You had mentioned the ones that go to jail. Are there certain situations where they would get, I guess, not special treatment, but where they're away from, I'm blanking on
jail?
Yeah, when they're in jail, like,
yeah,
they put some of these people
what
away.
They'll do is they'll try to, from what I've heard, and I've watched guys on YouTube and stuff, they try to put them in like segregation, so they're not in general population.
Yeah, that was
but
the word.
still, you're not going to catch a break from the guards.
Right.
You know, they have no use for you, and you're going to be with the child molesters, the rapists, the ones that can't be in general population. They're scumbags too. You know, you're not with a bunch of altar boys. You're with hardened criminals, but you're not going to be unless you want to be in general population. And I can't imagine why you would. But yeah, you're going to be with the ones in the protected class.
Yeah,
like separate from the ones that you may have actually had at hand in incarcerating.
That's a good question. I mean, depending on how active you were, and if you put people away and they're going to be up in the New York State prison thing, yeah, I would think if you spotted somebody, you'd be able to tell a correction officer or something, and they would do their best to keep you separated from that individual.
As we're all contemplating a life.
Yeah.
Right now.
Like, that's exactly what I was doing. I'm like,
like that would ever be a situation any of us are in right now, but
Hope not.
yeah, no.
I mean, we've already established I don't think like a criminal, so
No.
You're just very good at it. So, Vic, do you have any other fun stories that you said you had a few that you wanted to share with us a little bit ago?
Sure.
In addition to what you've done.
Yeah. No, there's a story in my book called Vacated by Death. And vacated by death means someone gets arrested, and before their case is adjudicated, there's a plea, they go to trial, the person dies before the case comes to its conclusion. And it was the early 90s. We were working until about 2 a.m. that night. And this kid pulls up to me and my partner, and he's like, someone just tried to kill me. And I'm like, looking at my watch, I'm like, it's almost 2 o'clock. Now I got to deal with this bullshit. And people tend to say things to the police to get your attention. So we got out of the car, and I said, what happened? He goes, some guy tried to shoot me. And he points to his car. And in New York, if you're sitting in the driver's seat on the left side, you have a New York State inspection sticker and a New York State registration sticker. Well, there was a grouping of about 5 bullet marks. And I said, oh shit, someone's a good shot. I go, what happened? And he was a limo driver. He was hired to take out these 3 or 4 girls for the evening, took them out. They went to a couple of clubs in Manhattan. He hooked up with one of the girls, and they made plans that he was going to take the limo back to his company. He was going to get his car, come back to her house, and they were going to go for breakfast. So when he pulls up to her house in his personal car, he sees the girls in front of her house, and she's arguing with this guy. And he doesn't know what to make of it. He's just sitting in the car, and the guy turns around, notices him parked there, says, oh, you want some of this? Reaches into his pocket, pulls out a 25, and starts throwing shots at him.
Oh, wow.
So the gun either jammed or he ran out of bullets. The kid said he popped up his head, and he just took off. And it was a 25, so the bullets didn't go through the windshield. Kind of bounced off. 25 is a very small projectile. Guy might have even been using half loads. I don't know. But I said, okay, get in the car. We shut the lights off on the radio call. We kind of creep down the block. Nothing. No one's out. Nothing. Go to the door. And he said the girl lived with her parents. She was young. She was like 19, 20. So I made a lot of noise just in case the girl wasn't going to come to the door. Parents, middle-aged, they open the door. What happened? I said, your daughter home? They go, yeah. The mother says, yeah, I heard her go to bed. She just came in a little while ago. I heard her go to bed. I go, you got to get her down. So the girl comes downstairs, and I told the parents, I go, listen, I told the parents what happened. And I says, I don't want to hear she doesn't know. I said, and the father goes, no, she knows. He goes, and the father's going off about the boyfriend. He's giving me his name, social security number. The father's had it with this kid. So she says, I broke up with him. He's been stalking me. She goes, I like the limo driver. He came by. She tells me what happened. So she's giving me the kid's address and stuff while we're in the house. The phone rings. This is pre-cell phones. It's the boyfriend. So we lower our radios. And I tell her, I says, tell him cops didn't show up. Everything's cool. You want to talk. Get him over here. So she says, yeah, he's going to come by in about 15 minutes. So we take the police cars. We park them about a block or 2 away. I call for another couple of cops. We're all hiding in the bushes. It's 4 a.m. in the spring. It's starting to get it's starting to hit daylight. See this kid come bouncing down the block. We all pop out. Police don't move. He knew we were there. He even told us, didn't have the gun. He got rid of the gun. So the witness IDs him. I charge him with attempted murder. I bring him into the station house, and I had our emergency service process the car, and they pulled a couple of slugs. One of the bullets didn't go through the windshield, but one of the shots went into a door. So they were able to pull a slug out of the door. So I'm vouchering it. I'm vouchering the shell casings for evidence. And the desk officer says, it's odd. He says, but earlier in the week, there's an NYPD lieutenant that lives on that block that works somewhere else. He just bought a new Land Cruiser and he parks it on that block. And someone threw a shot into his car with a 25. I says, is the round still here? He goes, yeah. So I filled out a request for ballistics to match, to see if the bullet that came out of the door of this limo driver matched the NYPD lieutenant. And they did. So what winds up happening is I go to court to testify before the grand jury, and the limo driver's shitting bricks. And he's like, I'm being threatened. Someone threw a brick through my parents' window. I'm getting phone calls in the middle of the night. You better not cooperate with the police. So the kid's family was really putting the screws to this kid. I go, listen, you got it. So I would check with the district attorney every couple of months to see what's going on with the case. And she says, well, the family's got money. They've hired a pretty good attorney. They're really thinking they're going to run the clock out on this and try to scare off the witness. But she goes, I'm not budging. He's going to jail for this shit. I said, no, I don't blame you. So one morning I went in and she was laughing. She goes, you're going to worry about that case. I go, did he take a plea? She goes, no, he got killed coming out of a bar on Eastchester Road. And I says, well, what happened? And she said, got into an argument with somebody in the bar. When he stepped outside, someone put two in his chest. I go, do they have a gunman? Nope. Neighborhood's not talking. So she said, she's vacated by death. And I had never heard that expression before. And that was the title of the chapter. And there's a couple other stories in there, not as, exciting as that one of people. I locked up a guy for DUI, died of cirrhosis of the liver before the case went to trial.
Yeah.
That kind of goes along with, I like both of those though. It's like they kind of died by what they were getting arrested for.
Yeah.
Like
he's a badass in life. He went out like a badass.
DCL, die cirrhosis liver. Yeah.
I was about to ask if you ever saw any karmatic justice pretty much on people that you couldn't catch for any certain thing, but I feel like you just answered that with those stories.
I had one. I had early in my career, it came over as a robbery on Broadway in like 250 something street. And we race up there and there's a guy laying in the street and he's got marks all over his face, like fucked up. And there's this big guy standing over him with the club anti-theft device.
I remember
red fucking
had that.
metal. Yeah. So what happened was the big guy holding the club, he was a bouncer in a Manhattan club. His girlfriend and him lived together and they were going someplace. And he went downstairs to get the car and he parked the car on the side of the building. The girlfriend comes out with her handbag and this piece of shit runs up to her, punches her in the face, and takes her bag. She fights him for the bag. He cracks her again, throws her on the floor, takes her bag. She runs around the corner, tells her boyfriend. He comes over and tunes the guy up. And all we basically had to do was put cuffs on the guy. And that was it. I thought that was pretty, karmatic justice.
Wham, bam. Thank you, ma'am. All right.
Exactly.
I had another one where Chinese restaurants or people over the boat from China, they're victimized a lot in big cities because they make terrible witnesses. They don't want to cooperate because they're hardworking people and they don't see the point of taking off to go and testify in court. And if there's a language barrier, and a lot of them have never seen black people before. So we have this robbery of a Chinese takeout place. And we pull up, and I'm trying to put a description over the air so the car's canvas in the area can look for these guys. And all I'm getting out of the guy is they were black. I get that. What do they look like? They were black. What were they wearing? They were black. I'm like, all right, just get in the car. So I go, I got 2 male blacks. That's all I had. So we're driving around, and we're driving past this cop bar, and a cop had just been murdered a couple of days before, so they had his funeral that day. And as we pull up, I see a Chinese guy jumping up and down with a cleaver, and there's 2 black guys laid out on the floor with a couple of pellet guns by their feet. And I'm like, and I see all these cops going into the bar. I'm like, what the fuck just happened? Well, what happened was the Chinese delivery guy grabbed a cleaver and started chasing, which takes balls because he thought they had guns, which they had BB guns, but they thought they had guns. He's chasing them with a cleaver. There's a bunch of cops standing in front of this bar. They knock out the bad guys and then go into the bar. So I got a Chinese delivery guy ID and 2 guys unconscious on the floor. That's them. That's them. They robbed my store. So we just cuffed them up, woke them up, put them in the car, and they woke up in a police car, and then they woke up in a jail cell.
Oh, gosh.
That'd be a crazy way to wake up. Like, the last thing I know, some Chinese guy was chasing me.
They were snoring.
I
Knocked out like snoring.
Oh, man.
Wow.
You just wanted some orange chicken or something.
Like,
so Alan's asking
I really want Chinese food now. Thanks.
Alan's asking if you have any mafia stories.
Yeah. My last 10 years, I worked in the auto crime division. Was that Alan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alan, do I got a book for you? Grand Theft Auto, the NYPD's auto crime division. That's filled with stories from my 10 years in the auto crime division. So we worked on organized crime cases. Different. Yes, you had the 5 families, the Italians, that they ran Queens and Brooklyn. I worked on Chinese gangs that were shipping 30 cars a month to China. Spanish gangs. We had Russian gangs stealing cars, dismantling cars, shipping cars out of the country. But our Queens office and Brooklyn office primarily did the 5 families. So working in the Bronx, what they would use us for is we were like ghosts because the mobsters didn't really know who we were. They didn't know us from surveillance. So what they would do with us is they would send us in to buy airbags or do surveillance late in the case because the wise guys didn't know who we were. They might think they're being followed, but they had never seen me before or my partner before, didn't know the cars. So we did, I'll tell you a funny mafia story. We would do insurance fraud cases. We call insurance frauds IJs, insurance jobs. And a lot of insurance jobs is someone's got a lease or they got in over their head for a car payment. They don't want to pay it anymore. The bank's not going to take the car back. So the quickest way to get out of that payment is make it disappear. The insurance company is going to make that payment and you just walk away. So there was this junkyard in Brooklyn that would take in IJ. So you had to know the guy. And what you would do is you would bring the guy your car on a Monday. He would chop the car up. And then Thursday, you would report it stolen. And then you would get your insurance check or your insurance company would would satisfy the loan. So what we did was we had a camera outside this place. So cars are going in and they're never coming out. But we've got the car going in on the 1st. Then the person fills out a theft report on the 5th saying she saw her car on the 4th. Well, that can't be. I've got a computer printout and video of your car going in on the 1st and never leaving. Now you're saying a week later it vanished in front of your house? And now you're going to make a claim? You're done. So what we would do is we would wait until we got 20, 30, 50 people in this net. And depending on the clientele, if it was people that owned houses and had footprints in the community, what we would do is we would tell them a day or 2 before, listen, you got to come to the precinct on such and such a day, surrender yourself with your lawyer. We got you for insurance fraud. And like, no. And you'd show them a photo and they go, oh, shit. I had a guy drop his hose in his front lawn. He was watering his grass. And I was like, remember that Dodge Caravan you reported stolen? He goes, yeah. He goes, no. I go, dude, the car had no reverse. I drove it. And he goes, oh, shit. And he dropped his hose in the front lawn. So if the clientele we thought would take off, then what you do is we would have a takedown day, and we would meet out in the main office in Queens, and it was like Mission Impossible. Everybody, so Bethany and Crystal are working together, me and Ricky working together. We would go with pairs of 20 or 30 people. Everybody would get 2 or 3 folders. And you want to round these people up as quickly as possible before they start getting on their cell phones making calls, and then people start taking off into the wind. So one of the first addresses is in Howard Beach in Queens, which is like the mafia capital of the world. So it was a wise guy, a guy in organized crime, and we knock on the door, and he comes to the door, and he goes, "Oh, shit." And I said, "Yeah, you got to come with us." And he goes, "State or federal?" It's state. He goes, "Oh, okay." So he lets us in, and he goes, "Can I put on something comfortable? Like, let's just say the guy's name was Rob." I go, "Rob, we're not here for you. We're here for Diane." "He's here for my wife." I said, "The car?" And he goes, "Oh shit, the car was registered to the wife, and the wife made the claim." Now, obviously, he knows the guy in the junkyard. It was his idea. But the wife's name is on the paperwork, and the wife filed a report.
Oh,
He goes, "Oh, shit." He goes, "Can I go upstairs and talk to my wife?" I said, "Sure." 15 minutes later, she comes downstairs. Her hair is up. She's in a pair of sweatpants. If looks could kill, because she's got to go to, she's going to get locked up for this now. You know, that's a piece of jewelry or a trip to Vegas in that world. Like, she was pissed because we're going to lock her up for insurance fraud that the husband got her involved in.
man.
So I work in insurance actually, and not in auto, but I used to. And there was a couple times that I was like, "Yeah, we found your car," and people were like you could tell, and like, just like we were just like, "Yeah,
there's
your
silence."
Yeah, they would just be like, "Oh," and they're like, "Oh, where?" And we're like, "About a mile from your house, burned in a ditch." And they'd be like, "Should have gotten it further." And I'm like, "Yeah."
Yeah, I remember one time we found a car with Florida plates in a vacant lot up in the Bronx, and they started an interior fire but left the windows up. So there's no oxygen. It just smoked out the windows, and it wasn't reported stolen. So I took the car. I brought it back to our office. I didn't impound it. I didn't put it in the system as an impound. And it was around this time of year. It was around November. And then like mid-December or January, someone in Florida reports it's stolen. Now, they're not going to let me go down to Florida and lock somebody up for insurance fraud. So Florida has a Department of Insurance Fraud. And I called this guy up. I, sent him a package of photos of the car, the printout of when I found it, all my paperwork, and he locked her up down and he was thrilled. He goes, "This is a gift. Thank you so much."
Nice.
Yeah. I mean, fraud is like, people ask why insurance rates are high. It's because of fraud.
Well, staged accidents now too. The staged accidents has surpassed people burning their car.
Oh, for sure. But fraud in some way. Yeah.
There was a kind of not a very good B-rated movie called The Darwin Awards, where the concept was the guy was pitching the idea that people will do this sort of type of fraud thing, and it's costing the insurance companies money, and so he would go and investigate the claims and stuff, and of course people were offing themselves in the most Darwinistic fashion possible, and again, it's a B-rated movie and it's kind of silly and fun, but similar thought.
I mean, like, for us, we had a couple of guys that's all they did was insurance fraud cases. I like the car chases. I like more dealing with the mobsters and stuff. But I mean, I made a handful of them. Sometimes they just fall into your lap. You'd find something that was so ridiculous. Like, no, fuck this guy. Like, what people would do is in New York, you've got a lot of 24-hour parking lots. And you leave your car. What people would do is they'll park their car in a parking lot and they'll leave, and then they'll go report it stolen. And the car is going to sit there for more than 30 days. And what happens? After 30 days, the insurance company starts processing the claim, and they're going to cut your check. And then We find the car 45 days later or something. They've already been paid. But we would, nowadays with cameras, sometimes with surveillance, you've got the person that owns the car leaving it there. Or sometimes we can put them there with cell phone records and stuff now. So it's not as easy to get away with it as the old days. But the garages were just as culpable too, because the garages would play games. They're supposed to, in New York at least, after 24 or 48 hours, they're supposed to do a lot count and try to notify the owner. Well, they don't, because what they'll do is if it's a shitty car or someone that does somewhere or a halfway decent car, they can put what's called a mechanic's lien or a garageman's lien on the car. And they can have that title flipped because their claim is that car owes us money for its time that it's sat there. No one has claimed it. And they'll get the car. But they play games and they would try to extort. Once it doesn't matter if the car's there 10 years. If that car was reported stolen, time out. You can't play that game, and they know it. If that car's got an alarm on it, they'll never be able to flip the title through the court system. So what they do is they'll call the person up, or they'll call the insurance company, and they'll try to extort them for money. So a lot of, and Crystal knows this, that most people that work in these SIUs are retired law enforcement, and they have friends and they have contacts in law enforcement. So I had just gotten to auto crime. I was there maybe a year. This retired guy calls me up. He worked for a rent-a-car company. It was one of the large ones, Avis Hertz. I don't remember. He says, I've got this car. It's parked in Midtown Manhattan in a parking garage. The owner's calling me up, and he's telling me I owe him $3,000. He's not going to give me the car. I go, was the car reported stolen? He goes, absolutely. Because I got to have a copy of the printout. I said, all right. We go down there. Of course, the owner's not around. The attendants are playing games. No one has the keys. So I start breaking their balls. The owner calls up. And he goes, that car owes me money and blah, blah. I mean, the building was right around the corner from the New York Times. And I said, listen, that car is leaving, whether you like it or not. And I says, and you might come with the car. I said, so it's up to you. He goes, I don't have to give you shit. I can't find the keys. So I said, all right. I says, this is what we're going to do. I says, I'm going to get another police car down here. We're going to block the entrance to your garage, and no one's getting in and no one's getting out. And I'm going to get a search warrant to take the car out of here. I says, then you're getting locked up. Found the keys, and we got the car out. But they would play games like that. I have no use for people in the towing industry or the garage industry. I'm sure there's one or two that's good, but for the most part, they were Alibaba and the 40 Thieves. Like, they would just do anything to extort money out of you.
Mm-hmm. Well, Londa said that, let me see here. She goes, someone reported my car stolen for a few months ago, and the police showed up at her house. She had to prove that was hers.
Wanda, that's
how did they report your car stolen? So they would have had to have had proof of ownership, a title or a registration. That kind of sounds like someone screwing with you.
Alan,
I'd have trouble reporting my car stolen because I'm not sure I'd remember the license plate number. I'd be like,
That's so funny you said that. I had to take a photo of mine.
I think I have a photo of mine. Or it's on
the
server box. Yeah.
I have to look back on my lease and see what I wrote down for my car. We'll take Alan's question and then we'll kind of wrap it up a bit. But
that's a good question.
He wants to know if there's any strange stories or ghost stories that you encountered.
Not in the Bronx.
No. Okay. Now over here at the apartment complex, I had a maintenance individual who would relay info to me on occasion, and he has served back in Nam for a bit, and in fact, he was one of the guys that would crawl through the different holes and stuff and check people.
Okay.
Yeah. He was a scrawny little dude, and so he's retired basically, but he's just here doing maintenance stuff because it's kind of easy he can do. And one of the apartments, apparently, he said it was haunted, and it was haunted by a guy that was kind of high up in the criminal industry, and he had ultimately killed himself in the apartment. And he let me know which one it was and stuff. Yes, Tunnel Rat is exactly what he called himself. But yeah, so and he's like, now don't tell anybody this.
As you go on a podcast.
Here we are.
Yeah. Well, I mean, no, I'm not telling like where and who and all that, but he had to paint over the scene that was on the wall and stuff. He said, yeah.
There's actually companies now.
Yeah.
That will go to crime scenes and clean the place up for landlords or even people that live there to deal with that.
And there's quite a bit of money in that too.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because it's biohazard cleaning. So you're paying more because they're dealing with, those are the claims I deal with now.
Nice.
Well, Vic, it was definitely fun having you again. Thank you so much for joining us. If you guys haven't yet, pick up his latest book. You guys can read it right there. Latest book right there. I just got mine in, so I'm going to start reading it. But thank you so much for joining us. We always have so much fun when you're on
guys,
there.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on my show. And if I could plug, I also have a podcast. It's called NYPD Through the Looking Glass, and I bring on retired cops and mobsters and organized crime people.
Where can they catch it at?
YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you can get podcasts, but it's definitely on YouTube now.
We should try to get Uncle Gary.
Who?
Oh.
Uncle Gary?
Our actual Uncle Gary. It's not a nickname or anything. He's a conspiracy theorist, but he's also a retired detective and for the Army. He was a detective for the Army.
Yeah, but he would also train, cops and other in law enforcement in particular
licensing and stuff.
Yeah, particularly for shooting scenarios and such. So. Yeah,
his machine that he would train people on, he would bring over for family functions, and it made a really fun family function event. But yeah, it would be fun to have you guys talk together. But thank you, Vic, for joining us.
Guys, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, catch his podcast, get his new book, and I believe we're going to start sometime in January, February with our next season. And we're kind of getting the lineup all planned up. We're getting a few authors lined up as well. Vic, we'd love to have you again for our next season in 2025. So anyway, you guys go ahead and check out his book, his podcast, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Season 4 coming up.
Yep, right? Is it 3 or 4?
3.
Yeah, 3.
3.
I'm like,
Vic, do you have anything else you want to?
Do you
have anything else you want to add on with that?
Blonde.
Who, me? No, I'm good. I appreciate it. I actually have a guest for you. I got a couple of guests for you guys if you're interested.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll tell you off air.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, guys. We will see you again in 2025 if we don't do a holiday episode, I guess. Okay. Bye.
Bye.